I never imagined the sound of handcuffs clicking around my wrists would come from my own father calling the police on me. My name is Ted. I am 28 years old, and I work as a mechanic fixing cars for a living. 3 days ago, my world collapsed when officers showed up at my apartment door at 6 in the morning, arresting me for allegedly destroying my father, Frank's prized 1967 Chevrolet Camaro SS worth $100,000. As neighbors peered through their windows, watching me get loaded into the patrol car, like some common criminal, my father stood on the sidewalk with tears streaming down his weathered face, pointing his finger at me and screaming that I had ruined his most precious possession out of pure spite. The fluorescent lights in the police station interrogation room buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I sat there still trying to process what had just happened to my life. My hands shook as I stared at the metal table, replaying the morning's events in my mind. The cold concrete walls felt like they were closing in on me with each passing minute. Detective Sarah Martinez entered the room carrying a thick manila folder stuffed with papers and photographs. She was a woman in her early 40s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp brown eyes that seemed to see right through me. Her badge gleamed under the harsh lighting as she settled into the chair across from me. "Ted, I'm going to be straight with you," she said, opening the folder with a crisp snap. "You're facing some serious charges here. Criminal mischief and destruction of property exceeding $50,000. That's a felony in this state." My stomach dropped to the floor. "Detective, I swear to you, I didn't touch my father's car. There has to be some kind of mistake." She pulled out a stack of color photographs and spread them across the table like a dealer shuffling cards. The images showed Frank's beloved Camaro in a condition I had never seen before. Deep scratches ran along the passenger side like claw marks from some massive beast. The front bumper was dented and hanging at an odd angle. The leather interior was slashed and torn with foam padding spilling out like cotton from a burst pillow. "Your father says you took the vehicle without permission 3 nights ago." Detective Martinez continued pulling out more documents. "According to his statement, you returned it in this condition after the two of you had a heated argument about your business." I felt my face go pale as I stared at the destruction. "Detective, I run a small auto repair shop. I would never damage a classic car like this. It goes against everything I believe in." She reached into the folder again and produced a USB drive. "Your father also provided security footage from his garage camera. The timestamp shows someone entering his property at 11:57 that night and leaving at 1:33 in the morning." My heart pounded against my ribcage as she connected the drive to a laptop and turned the screen toward me. The black and white footage was grainy but clear enough to see a figure in what looked like my distinctive brown leather jacket walking toward the garage. The person moved with purpose, using a key to open the door and disappearing inside. "That's my jacket," I whispered, recognizing the unique patches and wear patterns. But I wasn't wearing it that night. I couldn't have been. Detective Martinez leaned back in her chair and studied my face carefully. "Teddy, your father seems genuinely heartbroken about this. He told me the car represents 15 years of restoration work. He bought it as a rusted shell when you were just 13 years old and spent every weekend rebuilding it from the ground up." The weight of her words hit me like a sledgehammer. I knew how much that Camaro meant to Frank. He had worked on it in our garage throughout my teenage years, teaching me about engines and transmissions, while he carefully restored every component. The car was more than just a vehicle to him. It was a symbol of his craftsmanship and dedication. "Ma'am, I understand why this looks bad, but I'm telling you the truth. I didn't do this." She pulled out another document and slid it across the table. "Your father has already contacted his insurance company. He's also retained a private investigator to help build this case. Ted, he's not just angry about the damage. He's talking about pressing full criminal charges that could send you to prison for up to 5 years." The room started spinning around me as the full scope of the situation became clear. My own father wasn't just disappointed or upset. He genuinely believed I had destroyed his most prized possession out of malice, and was willing to see me behind bars for it. There's something else, Detective Martinez said, reaching for the final item in her folder. Your father hired private investigator William Hayes 2 weeks ago. According to Hayes' report, there's been ongoing tension between you and your father about money and your struggling business. She handed me a detailed report that made my blood run cold. The investigator had documented our recent arguments, photographed my failing auto shop, and even interviewed some of my former customers who had complained about delayed repairs. The report painted a picture of a resentful son who blamed his successful father for his own failures. This is insane, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. Yes, we've had our differences, but I would never destroy something he loves just to hurt him. Detective Martinez closed the folder and leaned forward. Ted, the evidence is pretty compelling. Security footage shows someone in your clothing entering the property with a key. Your father says you're the only other person who has access to his garage. And there's a clear motive documented by a professional investigator. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to piece together how my life had gone from normal to nightmare in the span of a few hours. The thought of spending 5 years in prison for something I didn't do was terrifying enough. But the idea that my own father believed I was capable of such cruelty was devastating. I need to call my lawyer, I finally managed to say. That's your right, she replied, standing up and gathering the evidence. But Ted, if you did this, coming clean now will go a lot easier for you than fighting it in court. As she left the room, I was alone with my thoughts, and the horrifying realization that the person who should have believed in my innocence more than anyone else in the world was the same person determined to see me convicted of a crime I didn't commit. Sitting in that cold interrogation room, my mind wandered back to the events that had led us to this point. My relationship with Frank had always been complicated, built on a foundation of unspoken expectations and quiet disappointments that had accumulated over the years like dust on an abandoned shelf. Frank Miller was a successful real estate developer who had built his company from nothing into one of the most respected firms in our mid-sized Colorado town. He wore expensive suits to work, drove luxury vehicles, and lived in a sprawling house in the nicest neighborhood. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold, and he expected the same level of success from his only son. I, on the other hand, had chosen a different path. After graduating from high school, I attended community college for automotive technology, while Frank pushed me toward business school. When I opened my own repair shop at 25, he made it clear he thought I was wasting my potential on blue-collar work. You've got brains, Ted, he would say during our increasingly tense family dinners. Why are you content fixing other people's broken cars when you could be building something that matters? The Camaro had always been the bridge between our two worlds. Frank had bought the rusted shell of the 1967 SS when I was 13, promising it would be a father-son project that would teach me valuable life lessons. Every Saturday morning, we would work together in the garage, and those were some of the happiest memories of my childhood. Frank would explain how each component worked while I handed him tools and watched him carefully restore every detail. The engine block was completely rebuilt with performance upgrades. The body was stripped to bare metal and painted a deep midnight blue that sparkled like stars in the garage lighting. The interior was reupholstered with premium leather in a rich cream color that complemented the exterior perfectly. This car is going to be worth a fortune someday, Frank would tell me as we worked. But more than that, it represents what happens when you commit to excellence and see a project through to completion. As the years passed and the restoration neared completion, our Saturday garage sessions became less frequent. Frank was busy with his expanding business empire, and I was focused on my own automotive education. The Camaro became something he worked on alone, a solitary pursuit that seemed to matter more to him than spending time with me. When I announced my intention to open my own repair shop, our relationship reached a breaking point. Frank couldn't understand why I wanted to get my hands dirty for a living when I could use my mechanical knowledge in a more profitable way. You could be designing cars or managing a dealership. he argued during one particularly heated discussion. Instead, you want to spend your life underneath rusted trucks changing oil filters. There's nothing wrong with honest work. I had replied, feeling defensive about my chosen profession. I never said there was. But you're settling for less than your potential, and I can't support that. Those words had stung more than any physical blow. Frank had never outright said he was disappointed in me, but his lack of support for my business dreams spoke volumes about how he really felt. The tension between us reached its peak 3 weeks ago when my shop hit a particularly rough financial patch. Several customers had defaulted on payments for major repair work, leaving me struggling to cover rent and supplier costs. I had reluctantly approached Frank for a short-term loan to keep the business afloat. We met at his office, a spacious corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown area he had helped develop. Frank sat behind his massive mahogany desk, reviewing my financial statements with the same critical eye he used to evaluate potential real estate investments. "Ted, these numbers are concerning," he said, removing his reading glasses and setting them on the desk. "Your accounts receivable is out of control and your profit margins are razor thin. I know it looks bad, but I've got several big jobs coming in next month that will turn things around." I explained, feeling like a child asking for permission rather than a grown man requesting a business loan. Frank leaned back in his leather chair and shook his head. "Son, this isn't the first time you've been in this position. Last year you had the same cash flow problems, and the year before that, you nearly had to close during the slow season. Every small business goes through growing pains. You should understand that better than anyone. The difference is that I learned from my mistakes and adapted my business model accordingly. You keep making the same errors in judgment and expecting different results." The conversation spiraled downhill from there. Frank refused the loan, suggesting instead that I consider selling the shop and finding employment with an established automotive company. His words felt like a complete rejection of everything I had worked to build. "You know what your problem is, Ted?" Frank said as I prepared to leave his office. "You've always resented my success instead of learning from it. That classic car in my garage represents the kind of dedication and attention to detail that builds lasting value. Your business represents the opposite approach. Hence, those words had cut deep because they contained a grain of truth I didn't want to acknowledge. I was jealous of how easily things seemed to come to Frank, and maybe I had unconsciously blamed him for my own struggles instead of taking full responsibility for my choices. Maybe I do resent the way you care more about that car than you ever cared about me. I had shot back in anger. At least when it's broken, you take the time to fix it properly. Frank's face had gone pale at my accusation. "That's not fair and you know it." "Is it? When was the last time you asked me about anything other than my business failures? When was the last time you said you were proud of something I accomplished?" I had stormed out of his office that day and we hadn't spoken since. 3 days later, I was sitting in police custody, accused of destroying the very symbol of excellence that Frank valued more than our relationship. Now, as I reflected on our history, I realized that someone had taken advantage of our family dysfunction to frame me for a crime that would destroy whatever remained of our bond. The person who did this knew about our arguments, understood the significance of the Camaro, and had access to information that would make me the perfect suspect. The question was no longer whether I could prove my innocence, but whether Frank and I would still have a relationship worth saving once the real truth came to light. My lawyer, David Peterson, arrived at the police station 2 hours after I called him. David was a criminal defense attorney in his early 50s with silver hair and a calm demeanor that had gotten me out of minor scrapes in the past. However, as he reviewed the evidence against me, his usually confident expression grew increasingly concerned. "Ted, I'm not going to lie to you," he said, spreading the police files across the small conference room table. "This case is going to be challenging. The security footage is problematic, and your father's testimony carries a lot of weight with local law enforcement. We posted bail using the equity in my repair shop as collateral But the financial strain was already threatening to destroy what remained of my struggling business. David explained that proving my innocence would require a comprehensive investigation that could cost more than I could afford. The good news is that the prosecutor will need to prove intent and opportunity beyond reasonable doubt, David said as we left the courthouse. The bad news is that the current evidence strongly suggests both. My first priority was establishing my alibi for the night of the incident. 3 nights ago, I had driven to my ex-girlfriend Jenny's apartment complex on the other side of town. Jenny Patterson and I had dated for 2 years before our relationship ended 6 months ago in a series of arguments about commitment and future plans. Jenny worked as a nurse at the regional medical center and lived in a modest apartment that reflected her practical personality. She was 26 years old with auburn hair and green eyes that could shift from warm and inviting to coldly distant, depending on her mood. Our breakup had been particularly bitter because I had been unable to commit to the kind of serious relationship she wanted. The night in question, I'd gone to her apartment hoping to apologize for how things had ended between us and possibly explore the possibility of reconciliation. Jenny had been reluctant to let me in. But after an hour of conversation on her doorstep, she had agreed to talk. I know I hurt you when I said I wasn't ready for marriage. I had told her sitting on her familiar couch that still smelled like the vanilla candles she always burned. But losing you made me realize that I was being afraid of commitment for all the wrong reasons. Jenny had listened patiently, but remained guarded about the possibility of getting back together. Ted, this isn't the first time you've shown up here wanting to try again. We've been through this cycle before and it always ends the same way. Our conversation had lasted until nearly 3 in the morning. I had even fallen asleep on her couch, waking up at dawn before driving home to shower and change for work. Jenny had asked me not to contact her again, unless I was absolutely certain about what I wanted from a relationship. When David called Jenny to request a statement confirming my alibi, her response was not what we had hoped for. She's refusing to get involved, David told me over the phone. She says she doesn't want to be dragged into your legal problems and that she's trying to move on with her life. The rejection felt like another kick while I was already down. Jenny's refusal to help meant I had no way to prove where I was during the time someone was destroying Frank's Camaro. Her silence effectively supported the prosecution's case against me. The situation became even worse when Frank arrived at the jail for what would become the most painful conversation of my life. He looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes that suggested he hadn't slept since discovering the damage to his car. I brought additional documentation for the insurance claim, Frank said, sitting across from me in the visitation area. His voice was flat and emotionless, like he was conducting a business meeting rather than talking to his son. He slid a folder through the slot in the protective glass. Inside were repair estimates from 3 different classic car restoration specialists. The lowest estimate was $73,000, while the highest reached $91,000. The insurance company would require police reports and court documentation before processing such a large claim. "Dad, please tell me you don't really believe I did this," I said, pressing my palm against the glass barrier between us. Frank looked directly into my eyes for the first time since my arrest. The pain and disappointment I saw there was worse than any physical punishment he could have inflicted. "Ted, I found my garage door open and my car destroyed. The security footage shows someone wearing your jacket using my spare key to get inside. You're the only other person who knows where that key is hidden. But why would I do something like this? What could I possibly gain by hurting you this way?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands folded on the small table. "Maybe you were angry about our last conversation. Maybe you wanted to hurt me the way you felt I had hurt you by refusing to support your business." The accusation hung between us like poison gas. "Dad, I was upset about the loan, but I would never destroy something you love. That car represents our best memories together. Those memories obviously don't mean as much to you as they do to me," Frank replied, his voice breaking slightly. Ted, this isn't just about the money or even the car itself. It's about the betrayal. I trusted you with something precious to me, and you violated that trust in the cruelest way possible. I wanted to reach through the glass and shake him to make him understand that someone was manipulating both of us. But the evidence was stacked against me, and Frank's pain was too real to dismiss. I'm going to find out who really did this, I told him as our visitation time ended. And when I do, I hope you can forgive me for the things I said in your office. Frank stood up slowly, looking older than his 55 years. Ted, the person who did this, was wearing your jacket and knew exactly where to find my spare key. There's nobody else it could have been. After he left, I sat alone in my cell, trying to piece together how someone could have framed me so perfectly. The security footage bothered me the most because something about it didn't feel right. I had watched myself in that grainy video, but the person's movement seemed slightly off. The figure in the footage appeared shorter and stockier than my usual build. The way they walked was different too, less confident, and more hurried than my normal gait. These details were subtle enough that Frank and the police had missed them, but they gave me hope that a more careful analysis might reveal the truth. My leather jacket was another crucial piece of the puzzle. I had assumed it was lost during a busy day at the shop several weeks ago, but now I realized someone had deliberately taken it for this exact purpose. Whoever planned this frame job had been watching me closely enough to steal my clothing and learn my family's routines. The spare key location was the most troubling aspect of the entire setup. Frank hid that key under a specific decorative stone in his garden, and very few people knew about its existence. The list of suspects was limited to family members and close friends who had observed Frank using it over the years. As I lay on the narrow jail bunk that night, staring at the concrete ceiling, I knew that proving my innocence would require more than just establishing an alibi. I needed to identify the real perpetrator and understand their motivation for destroying both the car and my relationship with Frank. The person responsible for this crime had intimate knowledge of our family dynamics and access to my personal belongings. They understood exactly how to drive a wedge between Frank and me while covering their own tracks with precision timing and careful planning. Somewhere in our circle of family and friends was someone who wanted to hurt both of us badly enough to orchestrate this elaborate deception. The challenge would be identifying them before the legal system convicted me of a crime I didn't commit. After spending a sleepless night in jail, I was determined to find the real person responsible for framing me. David managed to get me released on bond the next morning, but the conditions included surrendering my passport and agreeing to stay within the county limits while the investigation continued. My first stop was my repair shop, which felt like visiting a crime scene, even though nothing illegal had happened there. The familiar smell of motor oil and the clutter of automotive parts provided some comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to disappear if I couldn't clear my name. I needed to think systematically about who had both the access and the motive to set me up for this crime. The stolen leather jacket was a key piece of evidence, so I spent the morning retracing my steps from the weeks before it disappeared. The jacket had sentimental value because it belonged to my grandfather, a World War II veteran who had worked as a mechanic after returning from the Pacific Theater. The brown leather was worn and scarred from decades of use with distinctive patches and repairs that made it easily recognizable. I remembered wearing it to Frank's house for a family barbecue about a month ago, and several relatives had commented on its unique appearance. After that, I had worn it to work for a few days before noticing it was missing from my office closet. The family barbecue was significant because it represented the last time our extended family had gathered before the tensions between Frank and me reached their breaking point. My cousin Marcus had been there along with Frank's business partner Robert Chen, and several neighbors who had become family friends over the years. Marcus Miller was Frank's nephew, the son of Frank's younger brother, who had died in a car accident 10 years earlier. Frank had helped raise Marcus after his father's death, paying for his education and giving him work on construction projects when he struggled to find steady employment. Marcus was 31 years old, 2 inches shorter than me, and built like a linebacker from his years working construction. He had always been jealous of the relationship between Frank and me, especially during the Camaro restoration project when Frank spent every weekend teaching me about automotive mechanics. Recent conversations with family members had revealed that Marcus was experiencing serious financial difficulties. His gambling problem had gotten worse over the past year, and he owed money to some dangerous people who weren't patient about collecting debts. I drove to the construction site where Marcus was working a new shopping complex on the outskirts of town. The job foreman told me Marcus was operating a bulldozer in the back lot clearing debris from the demolition phase of the project. Marcus saw me approaching and shut down his machine with obvious reluctance. He climbed down from the operator's seat wearing dirty work clothes and a defensive expression that immediately put me on guard. "Ted, I heard about your troubles with Uncle Frank," he said, removing his hard hat and wiping sweat from his forehead. "That's a real shame about the Camaro. Marcus, I need to ask you some questions about that night. Did you notice anything unusual around Frank's neighborhood 3 days ago?" His body language changed subtly, becoming more tense and guarded. "I wasn't anywhere near Uncle Frank's house that night. I was home watching television." "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just trying to figure out who might have had access to Frank's property and knowledge of his routines." Marcus glanced around nervously as if checking to see who might be listening to our conversation. "Look, Ted, I feel bad about what happened between you and Uncle Frank, but I can't help you. I've got my own problems to worry about." "What kind of problems?" "Nothing that concerns you?" He snapped, his defensive tone becoming more pronounced. "I heard you're looking for someone to blame for your own mistakes. That's not going to work with me." The conversation was clearly making him uncomfortable, and his eagerness to end it only increased my suspicions. I decided to push a little harder to see how he would react. "Marcus Frank mentioned that you asked him for money recently. How much did you need?" His face flushed red with anger, and for a moment I thought he might take a swing at me. "That's between Uncle Frank and me. You don't have any right to ask about our private conversations. I'm just trying to understand who might have had reasons to be angry with Frank. If you needed money and he refused to help, that could have created some resentment." Marcus stepped closer, invading my personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate me. "You think I destroyed that car because Uncle Frank wouldn't give me a loan? That's insane, Ted. I've got more respect for that vehicle than you ever did." "What do you mean by that?" "Everyone knows you resented the attention Uncle Frank gave to that Camaro. You were always jealous of the time and money he invested in it instead of supporting your failing business." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to be believable. Marcus was using my own documented frustrations against me, which suggested he had been thinking about this situation more carefully than his casual demeanor implied. "Marcus, I may have been frustrated with Frank's priorities, but I would never destroy something that meant so much to him. Can you say the same thing?" He backed away slightly, but his eyes remained hostile. "I don't have to listen to this garbage. You're facing serious criminal charges and you're trying to drag innocent people down with you. If you're innocent, then you shouldn't have any problem answering my questions." Marcus turned toward his bulldozer, clearly ending our conversation. "Ted, if I were you, I'd worry less about blaming other people and more about finding a good lawyer. Uncle Frank has resources and connections that you don't have." As he climbed back into his machine, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Marcus knew details about Frank's spare key hiding place, having helped with yard work at the house many times over the years. He also had the physical strength and tool knowledge necessary to damage the Camaro in the specific ways shown in the police photographs. More importantly, Marcus had been present at the family barbecue where I wore my grandfather's leather jacket. He would have had the opportunity to take it while everyone was distracted by the social gathering. I spent the rest of the day researching Marcus's financial situation through public records and conversations with mutual acquaintances. What I discovered painted a picture of someone desperate enough to take extreme measures to solve his money problems. Marcus owed $47,000 to various creditors, including some unsavory characters who had threatened physical violence if he didn't pay up soon. His construction work was seasonal and unreliable, leaving him without steady income during slow periods. More disturbing was what I learned about Marcus's relationship with the Camaro itself. Several family members mentioned that Marcus had always believed Frank would leave him the car in his will, especially after his father's death, when Frank became a surrogate parent figure. Marcus used to talk about that car like it was already his, and Frank's neighbor told me. He would spend hours looking at it whenever he visited, asking questions about its value and maintenance requirements. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together in a way that pointed directly at Marcus as the perpetrator. He had the motive, opportunity, and intimate knowledge necessary to frame me while destroying evidence of his own involvement. But I still needed proof that would convince the police to investigate someone other than me. Marcus was smart enough to cover his tracks carefully, and his family relationship with Frank would make any accusations against him difficult to pursue. As evening approached, I realized that solving this mystery would require more than just identifying the likely suspect. I needed to understand the full scope of the conspiracy and determine whether Marcus had acted alone or with help from someone else who wanted to see me destroyed. The next morning brought a breakthrough that changed everything about my understanding of the case. David called me at 7 a.m. with news that Detective Martinez had agreed to reopen certain aspects of the investigation based on information I had provided about Marcus's financial situation. "Ted, the police are going to question your cousin about his whereabouts that night," David explained. "But you need to understand that this could backfire if we're wrong about his involvement. Making false accusations against family members won't help your case." I drove to the police station with a mixture of hope and anxiety churning in my stomach. David had arranged for me to observe Marcus's interview through the one-way glass in the adjacent room, giving me a chance to see how he handled the pressure of official questioning. Detective Martinez conducted the interview with professional calm, starting with routine questions about Marcus's relationship with Frank and his knowledge of the Camaro. Marcus appeared relaxed initially, answering questions with the same casual demeanor he had shown during our confrontation at the construction site. "Marcus, can you tell me where you were on the night of the 20th, between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.? Detective Martinez asked, consulting her notes. "I was at home watching television and drinking beer. It was a Tuesday night, so I went to bed early because I had to work the next morning." "Was anyone with you who could verify that information?" Marcus shifted slightly in his chair, the first sign that the questioning was making him uncomfortable. "No, I live alone. But I can show you my cable bill if you want to see what programs I recorded that night." Detective Martinez made notes and continued with questions about Marcus's financial situation. As the interview progressed, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge in his story about his relationship with Frank and his knowledge of the family's routines. "Your uncle mentioned that you asked him for a loan recently. Can you tell me about that conversation?" "It wasn't a big deal," Marcus replied, but his body language suggested otherwise. "I needed some help with bills, and Uncle Frank explained that he couldn't loan money to family members because it causes problems." "How much money did you ask for?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Around $15,000. Just enough to catch up on some debts and get back on my feet." "That's significantly more than the help with bills you just described. Were you facing any serious financial pressure that might have made this loan urgent?" The question clearly made Marcus nervous. He began fidgeting with his hands and avoiding eye contact with the detective. "Everyone has financial pressure these days. That doesn't mean I would hurt my uncle or destroy his property." Detective Martinez pulled out photographs of the damaged Camaro and spread them across the table. "Marcus, these images show very specific types of damage that would require someone with knowledge of automotive systems and access to professional tools." Marcus studied the photographs with what appeared to be genuine surprise, but I noticed that his reaction seemed slightly rehearsed. "This is terrible. I can't believe someone would do this to Uncle Frank's car. The damage patterns suggest that whoever did this understood exactly how to destroy the most valuable components while making it look like random vandalism." "Would you say you have that kind of automotive knowledge?" "I work construction, not automotive repair. I know about heavy machinery, but I wouldn't know how to specifically damage a classic car like this." It was a good answer, but Detective Martinez pressed forward with questions about Marcus's access to my personal belongings and knowledge of Frank's security measures. Ted mentioned that his leather jacket disappeared several weeks ago. "Do you remember seeing that jacket at family gatherings?" "Maybe. Ted wore that old jacket a lot. I never paid much attention to it." The jacket was distinctive because it belonged to his grandfather and had unique patches and repairs. Someone would have to know Ted pretty well to recognize its significance. Marcus was becoming increasingly defensive and his answers were getting shorter and less detailed. "Detective, I don't understand why you're asking me these questions. I thought Ted was already arrested for this crime." "We're conducting a thorough investigation to make sure we understand all the facts." "Marcus, did you know that Frank kept a spare key hidden in his garden?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face went pale, and he took several seconds to formulate a response. "A lot of people know about that key. Frank has mentioned it to family members and neighbors over the years. Can you describe where that key is hidden?" Marcus looked trapped. If he claimed not to know the location, it would contradict his previous statement about family knowledge. If he described it accurately, it would prove he had the access necessary to commit the crime. "I think it's under one of the decorative stones near the garden path, but I'm not sure which one." "It's under the third stone from the left next to the rose bushes. You seem to have a pretty good idea of Frank's security arrangements." The interview continued for another 30 minutes with Detective Martinez methodically documenting inconsistencies in Marcus's story. His alibi was weak, his financial motivation was clear, and his knowledge of family routines made him a viable suspect. But the real breakthrough came when Detective Martinez asked about Marcus's recent internet searches and financial transactions. Police had obtained warrants to examine his computer and bank records based on the information I had provided about his gambling debts. "Marcus, our technology specialists found some interesting searches on your computer from 3 weeks ago. You researched the value of 1967 Camaro SS models and contacted several classic car insurance adjusters." Marcus's composure finally cracked completely. "I was just curious about the car's value. That doesn't mean anything criminal. You also made some large cash deposits over the past month, despite claiming to have financial difficulties. Where did that money come from?" "I won some money gambling. Sometimes you get lucky at the casino." "The deposits totaled $12,000 over 4 weeks. That's an unusual winning streak for someone who claims to have a gambling problem." Detective Martinez pulled out bank records and spread them across the table next to the photographs of the damaged car. "Marcus, these deposits don't match any casino winnings reported to the IRS. In fact, they appear to be structured to avoid bank reporting requirements." The implications of this evidence were staggering. Marcus had been receiving money from someone else, and he had been researching the Camaro's value weeks before the crime occurred. This wasn't a spontaneous act of vandalism motivated by rejection of a loan request. It was a carefully planned conspiracy. "I want to talk to a lawyer," Marcus said, finally recognizing how much trouble he was in. But Detective Martinez had one more question that would completely unravel his story. "Marcus, the damage to Frank's car required very specific knowledge about which components would be most expensive to replace. You claimed not to have automotive expertise, but you were able to describe details about the destruction that weren't included in our public reports." Marcus realized his mistake too late. During the interview, he had mentioned specific damage to the transmission system and electronic components that only the actual perpetrator would have known about. "I must have heard about that from someone else," he said weakly. "Who else would have that information?" "Marcus, the crime scene details haven't been shared with anyone outside the investigation team." As Marcus was read his rights and placed under arrest, I felt a mixture of relief and confusion. We had identified one of the people responsible for framing me, but the large cash deposits suggested he wasn't working alone. Someone with significant financial resources had paid Marcus to destroy the Camaro and frame me for the crime. The question now was identifying that person and understanding their ultimate motivation for orchestrating such an elaborate conspiracy. Detective Martinez promised to continue investigating the source of Marcus's mysterious income, while I tried to process the fact that my own cousin had betrayed me for money. The family relationships I had taken for granted were proving to be far more fragile and complicated than I had ever imagined. The investigation into Marcus's mysterious cash deposits led Detective Martinez down a path none of us had anticipated. Within 48 hours of his arrest, the financial trail revealed a conspiracy that went far beyond simple family jealousy or gambling debts. David and I met with Detective Martinez in her office as she prepared to brief us on the discoveries that would completely reshape our understanding of the case. The atmosphere was tense as she opened a new file folder that was even thicker than the original evidence against me. "Ted, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." Detective Martinez began settling into her chair with a grave expression. The investigation into Marcus's finances uncovered a much larger criminal enterprise that your family has been unknowingly caught up in. She pulled out bank records and financial documents that showed a complex pattern of money movement between various accounts. Marcus received a total of $38,000 over 6 weeks from a shell company that we've traced back to Robert Chen, your father's business partner. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. Robert Chen had been like a second father to me, growing up Frank's closest friend and business partner for over 20 years. He was the person Frank trusted most in the world outside of family, and I had never considered him as a potential suspect. "Detective, are you saying Robert Chen paid Marcus to destroy the Camaro and frame me?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." But the motivation goes much deeper than personal grudges or family disputes. Chen has been systematically embezzling money from your father's real estate company for the past 3 years. She spread out financial records that showed a sophisticated theft operation involving fake vendor payments, inflated project costs, and phantom employee salaries. Chen had stolen over $600,000 from the company while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. Your father was planning a comprehensive financial audit of the company next month, Detective Martinez continued. Chen discovered this through internal communications and realized the audit would expose his embezzlement scheme. The pieces of the conspiracy began falling into place with sickening clarity. Chen needed a major distraction that would delay or prevent Frank's planned audit, while giving him time to cover his tracks and move stolen funds to offshore accounts. Creating a family crisis between Frank and me would accomplish both goals, I said, understanding the twisted logic of Chen's plan. Frank would be too emotionally devastated to focus on business, and I would be too busy defending myself against criminal charges to help him with company matters. Exactly, Chen recruited Marcus by paying off his gambling debts and offering additional money for participating in the frame job. Marcus provided inside information about family routines and access to your personal belongings. Detective Martinez pulled out surveillance photographs that showed Chen meeting with Marcus at various locations over the past 2 months. Our investigation revealed that this conspiracy has been in development for quite some time. Chen has been planning his exit strategy while building the perfect setup to destroy your relationship with your father. The emotional impact of this betrayal was overwhelming. Robert Chen had been present at every major milestone of my life. He had attended my graduation, celebrated birthdays and holidays with our family, and served as a mentor figure during my difficult teenage years. "There's more," Detective Martinez said, reaching for another set of documents. Chen's embezzlement scheme included creating fake liens against company properties, including your father's house. If the audit had proceeded as planned, Frank would have discovered that his home was being used as collateral for loans that never existed. The scope of Chen's criminal enterprise was staggering. He hadn't just stolen money, he had systematically undermined the financial foundation of Frank's entire business empire while maintaining the facade of friendship and partnership. How long would it have taken for Chen to completely destroy Frank's company? I asked. Based on the financial projections we've found, Chen could have bankrupted your father within 18 months while making it appear to be the result of market forces and bad business decisions. The most disturbing aspect of the conspiracy was how perfectly Chen had manipulated our family's emotional dynamics to serve his criminal purposes. He understood that the tension between Frank and me made us vulnerable to a scheme that would pit us against each other. Chen knew that Frank would believe the worst about me because of our recent arguments, I realized. And he knew that I would be too proud to ask for help from family members who might have supported me. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. Chen spent months studying your family's relationships and identifying the most effective way to create maximum emotional damage with minimum risk to himself. She pulled out the final piece of evidence that would prove Chen's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Ted, do you remember Officer Rodriguez who made the initial arrest at your apartment? Of course. He was the first responder to Frank's call about the vandalism. Officer Rodriguez wears a body camera and has dashcam footage in his patrol car that records continuously during his shift. We've been reviewing that footage as part of our investigation into the timeline of events. Detective Martinez connected a laptop computer to a large monitor and pulled up video files from the night of the crime. This footage shows Officer Rodriguez's route through your father's neighborhood during his routine patrol. The dashcam video was higher quality than Frank's security footage with clear timestamps and better lighting from the patrol car's headlights. As the footage played, I could see Chen's luxury sedan parked on a side street near Frank's house at 11:45 p.m. The timestamp proves that Chen was in the area at the exact time someone was breaking into your father's garage, Detective Martinez explained. But there's something even more incriminating. She fast-forwarded the video to 1:28 a.m. just before the intruder left Frank's property. The dashcam clearly captured a figure walking away from the garage wearing my distinctive leather jacket, but this figure was shorter and stockier than my usual build, matching Chen's physical characteristics perfectly. The video quality is clear enough to make a positive identification, Detective Martinez said. Chen thought he was safe because your father's security camera was positioned at a bad angle and produced grainy footage. He didn't know about the police dashcam that recorded his entire operation. The final piece of evidence was the most damning of all. As Chen walked past the patrol car, he briefly looked directly into the dashcam. His face was clearly visible for several seconds, providing undeniable proof of his presence at the crime scene. Chen made one crucial mistake, Detective Martinez observed. He assumed that wearing Ted's jacket would be sufficient to frame him for the crime. But he didn't account for the physical differences that would be obvious to anyone who knew both men well. The video evidence also showed Chen carrying a bag of tools that matched the specific damage patterns found on the Camaro. He had clearly researched the car's most valuable components and targeted them for maximum financial impact. Chen wanted to ensure that the insurance claim would be large enough to create serious financial pressure for your father. While the embezzlement investigation was delayed, Detective Martinez explained. As we watched the dashcam footage, I felt a mixture of relief and rage that was difficult to process. My innocence was finally proven beyond any doubt, but the cost of that proof included discovering that someone I had trusted completely had orchestrated the destruction of my family relationships for purely selfish reasons. Detective, how long will it take to arrest Chen and recover the stolen money? We're coordinating with federal authorities because the embezzlement involves interstate banking violations. Chen will be arrested within the next few hours and will be freezing his assets to prevent him from moving additional funds offshore. The investigation had revealed a level of betrayal that went far beyond what any of us had imagined. Chen's conspiracy had threatened to destroy not just my relationship with Frank, but Frank's entire livelihood and financial security. As Detective Martinez prepared the arrest warrants, I realized that the most difficult conversation of my life would be telling Frank that his closest friend and business partner had been systematically stealing from him while plotting to frame his son for a crime he didn't commit. The call to Frank's office was the hardest phone call I had ever made in my life. Detective Martinez had agreed to let me break the news about Chen's betrayal before the arrest became public understanding that Frank deserved to hear the truth from family rather than from news reports or police announcements. "Dad, I need you to sit down," I said when Frank answered his office phone. "The police have discovered who really destroyed your Camaro, and the truth is going to be very difficult for you to accept." Frank's voice was cautious but hopeful. "Ted, please tell me you're not calling to maintain your innocence again. I've seen the evidence against you. Dad, the evidence was manufactured by Robert Chen and Marcus. They worked together to frame me as part of a much larger criminal conspiracy." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for nearly 30 seconds. I could imagine Frank processing this information, trying to reconcile his trust in Chen with the possibility that his business partner could be capable of such elaborate deception. "That's impossible," Frank finally said. "Robert is like a brother to me. He would never hurt our family or steal from the company." Dad, Detective Martinez has bank records showing that Chen paid Marcus $38,000 to participate in framing me. "Chen has been embezzling money from your company for 3 years, and he needed a distraction to prevent you from discovering the theft." I explained the dashcam evidence, the financial records, and the timeline of Chen's conspiracy, while Frank listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he asked me to repeat certain details as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "The police are going to arrest Chen within the hour," I told him. "Detective Martinez wants to meet with both of us to review all the evidence and discuss the recovery of stolen funds." Frank's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally responded. "Ted, if what you're telling me is true, then I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I believed the worst about my own son, while trusting a man who was systematically destroying everything I worked to build. Dad Chen manipulated both of us. He understood our relationship well enough to know exactly how to turn us against each other." We met at the police station 2 hours later, and I watched Frank's face as Detective Martinez played the dashcam footage showing Chen wearing my leather jacket. The moment Frank saw his business partner's face clearly visible in the video, 20 years of friendship and trust crumbled before my eyes. "I can't believe I was so blind," Frank said, his voice breaking with emotion. Robert sat in my office and helped me prepare the criminal complaint against Ted. He encouraged me to press full charges and hire a private investigator. He was actively helping to destroy my relationship with my son. Detective Martinez explained that Chen's embezzlement scheme was even more extensive than initially discovered. Federal investigators had found evidence of additional thefts from other business partners and clients, bringing the total stolen amount to over $1.2 million. "Mr. Miller, Chen used your company's reputation and resources to defraud multiple victims, while you unknowingly provided legitimacy to his operations," Detective Martinez said. "You're as much a victim in this case as Ted is." The legal proceedings moved quickly once Chen was arrested. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including video footage, financial records, and Marcus's cooperation, Chen's lawyers advised him to negotiate a plea agreement rather than risk a lengthy federal trial. Chen was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims. Marcus received a lighter sentence of 3 years in state prison for his cooperation with the prosecution, but his relationship with our family was permanently severed. The insurance company not only cleared me of all wrongdoing, but also expedited Frank's claim for the Camaro repairs. The settlement provided enough money to restore the car to its original condition, while leaving Frank with additional funds to invest in legitimate business opportunities. 3 weeks after Chen's arrest, Frank appeared at my repair shop with a proposal that would change both of our lives. He wanted to use his insurance settlement and recovered stolen funds to become a partner in my automotive business, combining my mechanical expertise with his business management skills. Ted, I've spent 20 years trusting the wrong person while doubting the right one, Frank said as we walked through my shop together. I want to make up for that by supporting your dreams the way I should have from the beginning. We spent the next month developing a business plan that would transform my struggling garage into a comprehensive automotive service center specializing in classic car restoration and high-end repairs. Frank's investment and business connections provided the resources I needed to expand operations while maintaining the hands-on approach I loved about automotive work. The damaged Camaro became our first joint project, a symbol of rebuilding our relationship while creating something beautiful together. Working side by side in the expanded shop, Frank and I rediscovered the father-son bond that had been strongest during the original restoration years earlier. You know, Ted, this car looks even better now than it did before the damage, Frank said, as we installed the final pieces of the restored interior. Sometimes destruction creates opportunities for improvement that wouldn't have existed otherwise. The process of rebuilding the Camaro paralleled the process of rebuilding our relationship. Frank learned to appreciate my mechanical skills and business instincts, while I gained respect for his strategic thinking and relationship-building abilities. 6 months after the arrest, my former relationship with Jenny also found new life. When she learned the full truth about the conspiracy against me, she called to apologize for not supporting me during my darkest hour. Ted, I was so angry about our breakup that I couldn't see past my own hurt feelings to help someone I supposedly loved, she said during a long conversation about trust and forgiveness. I should have known you were incapable of destroying something your father treasured. Jenny and I began dating again, slowly building a stronger foundation based on improved communication and mutual support. The experience of nearly losing everything I valued had taught me the importance of commitment and vulnerability in close relationships. The expanded automotive business exceeded all our projections within the first year. Frank's investment and networking brought in high-end restoration projects that allowed me to hire additional skilled mechanics while maintaining profitability and quality standards. More importantly, Frank and I developed the kind of adult relationship we had never achieved before the crisis. He stopped trying to control my career choices and began celebrating my successes while I learned to ask for advice and support rather than struggling alone with business challenges. Dad, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago, I said, as we put the finishing touches on the Camaro's restoration. I was jealous of the attention you gave to this car because I wanted that same level of care and dedication from you as a person. Frank set down his tools and looked directly at me. Ted, I poured so much energy into this car because working on it reminded me of the best times we shared together when you were younger. I thought you had outgrown needing that connection with me. I never outgrew needing my father's approval and support. I just got tired of feeling like I was competing with a machine for your attention. We finished the restoration that day with a deeper understanding of each other's perspectives and needs. The Camaro represented not just Frank's craftsmanship, but the evolution of our relationship from competition and misunderstanding to collaboration and mutual respect. The experience taught me that even the most devastating betrayals can create opportunities for growth and positive change if we approach them with wisdom and forgiveness. Chen's conspiracy had nearly destroyed our family, but surviving it together made us stronger and more appreciative of what we meant to each other. Frank learned that success in business means nothing without strong family relationships, while I discovered that asking for help and support is a sign of strength rather than weakness. The crisis forced both of us to examine our priorities and choose family over pride. Today, our automotive business continues to thrive as a true partnership between father and son. The restored Camaro sits in our shop showroom not just as an example of our technical abilities, but as a reminder of our journey from mistrust and conflict to love and collaboration. Every time I see that beautiful midnight blue paint gleaming under the shop lights, I remember how close we came to losing everything that mattered. The experience taught me that family relationships require the same careful attention and maintenance as classic automobiles, regular care, honest communication, and the wisdom to know when professional help is needed. Frank and I now make it a priority to have dinner together every Sunday, using that time to discuss both business matters and personal concerns without the distractions of work or crisis. We've learned that preventing problems is much easier than fixing them after they've caused damage. The most important lesson from this entire experience is that trust once broken can be rebuilt with patience, honesty, and commitment to change. Frank's willingness to admit his mistakes and invest in our relationship proved that love is stronger than pride when people choose to prioritize what really matters in life. As I write this story, I want to ask you a question that goes to the heart of what we've learned together. When was the last time you told someone important in your life that you appreciated them not just for what they do, but for who they are? Family relationships require the same regular maintenance as any valuable possession, and sometimes it takes a crisis to remind us of what we might lose if we take those relationships for granted. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family relationships, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing about the power of forgiveness and second chances. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about overcoming life's challenges and finding strength in unexpected places. Your support helps us continue sharing these important messages about family trust and the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey, and I wish you the courage to rebuild any broken relationships in your own life with the same patience and dedication that Frank and I brought to restoring that beautiful Camaro. Sometimes the most valuable treasures in life are the ones we almost lose, but find the wisdom to fight for and preserve.